afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have the webinar Using Technology to Drive Outcomes for Adult Learners, Real-World Success Stories from the Classroom. This is brought to you by NGen, our great partners. And I just want to turn it over to Katie and the team, and everyone enjoy the webinar. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for having us. We're so excited to be here. I am thrilled to be moderating this webinar today because it was my most favorite session at COABE in the spring. And we got the team back together again to answer everyone's questions about how to use technology to drive outcomes for adult learners. My name is Katie Brown. I'm the founder and chief education officer of NGen. And our mission is to remove English as a barrier for immigrants, refugees, and speakers of other languages so that they can access jobs with the potential for economic mobility. I've been working with adult learners my whole career, about 27 years. My PhD is in second language acquisition, and I have always been focused at the intersection of technology, research, adult learners, and outcomes, which is why I'm thrilled today to have these three great panelists to answer all of your questions about what we know about how to use technology to make learning more efficient and effective and to help it reach more learners. So I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. And by way of introduction, people are going to share a little bit about how they first got started teaching with technology. In terms of housekeeping, I have some questions prepared for our speakers today, and we will also be answering questions from the attendees. So please, please, please put your questions into the Q&A, and we'll go through and answer them as we're going. So we're going to start with Fatma.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Well, at least good afternoon in New York. I know what your time zone is. So hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Always amazing to be in the company of such amazing women. So thank you for having me. I am Fatma Ghailan. I work at Queens Public Library as Director of Community Learning, where we support adult and young adult learners learn languages, specifically English for speakers of other languages, obtain their high school equivalency, digital literacy, get acquainted with different resources available to them and help them get certified and prepared for the workplace. I'm also a doctoral student and I specifically work in the field of adult education, and I'm looking at ways in which we can support our learners get assisted by technology. So it's always interesting to talk about use of technology in teaching. I've started using tech in teaching way back in the day when I started with ESOL, and it was just not a choice. All the books that come with Cambridge come with QR codes, they come with CDs. It's all different technology, but finding ways to support your students get their aha moments, whether by using tools at home with the flipped learning method, using apps, and just finding ways to stay engaged with the language outside of the classroom. And I'll pass it on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cacicio. I'm the director of the new Adult Literacy and Learning Impact Network, which is convened by the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. We are a coalition of 14 national organizations who are working to address issues of adult literacy in the United States, including digital literacy. So I'm really happy to be here today. Before I joined All In, I was at Digital Promise, where I led a lot of our research on understanding the use of digital tools and technologies on adults, mostly working adults. And prior to that, I was in New York City for many years, working with older youth and adults, mostly immigrants, in high school equivalency, career and technical education, as well as preparing for college and life and workforce. So super excited to kind of bring all of those experiences together, in direct service and research, and now in national efforts that include, advocacy, thought leadership, and convening people together across different, I would say, components of the adult learning ecosystem, so we can kind of talk through and work through some of these issues together. So excited to be here and continue this conversation that we had at CoApe.
Rachel?
Sarah, you didn't say when you started using technology.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah,
didn't
I
say
forgot. I
that.
forgot. It was such a long intro. So I was thinking a lot about this question, and one of the first memories I have of using technology, I was working as a writing instructor in the South Bronx. And we were working for this project called the Student Press Initiative at Teachers College, where the students write personal narratives. They're, practicing skills to pass their high school equivalency, but also it led to publication, right? So that motivation piece was really a huge part of this writing project. And we had to type up and publish all of these stories, but most of my students were new arrivals, did not have email, did not, have never typed anything. And so a lot of my work was helping students first write their narratives on paper, then type it, on the computer, practicing basic skills. And I remember, like many of you on the call, probably rolling my cart of laptops, from the main office to into the elevator, then into the classroom. And so helping students develop those basic skills, build those confidence, and then learning how to save a document, learning how to attach a document, creating an email to send a document. I was not prepared to teach digital skills, but as a writing teacher, I realized quickly, everyone is teaching digital skills with whatever context they're teaching. So I'm sure many of you had shared experience like that.
Yes, definitely. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Riggs. I'm a technical advisor for World Education, and I do a lot of professional development of technical assistance materials. I'm on right now an exciting research study. So I do a lot of work for our EdTech Center, and then I also help lead our Crowded Learning Open Education Initiative. And am leading our AI for Learning and Work initiative, just that we recently launched this year. My background is TESOL, so I, was trained, got my degree in TESOL, and or ESL, as some may know it. And I did that at a community college. That was my first exposure to adult basic education. And then went on to be an instructional specialist, and then got my job here with World Education. So I am not far removed from the classroom, and all of those technology struggles are still fresh in my mind, and I apply them always to my work. So the first time I started teaching with technology, I like to go all the way back to outside of the classroom. First, when I graduated high school, I moved to Honduras, and I taught my best friend there about the home row, and told her, you can never type as fast as me until you start using the home row, because she was like one of those chicken peckers. And then I remember when I moved back to the US, I had a boss in an insurance agency where I was just doing administrative work, who couldn't use his Android phone. And so he started building in time in my hourly schedule for me to go and train him with his Android phone. So that was really, truly my beginning of teaching with technology. And I like to remember that, because it reminds us that it's not just in the classroom that those concepts are so important and essential. It's every area of life. And then once I got into the classroom, of course, I had ESOL, an ESOL class, and so many learners at different levels of comfort with technology and digital skills. And I recall them all having smartphones. And I said to myself, if I could just find a way to use their smartphones more in class, use Google Maps, use their text messaging, leverage these things that they all have in their phones, then we can build digital skills in the context of language learning. So that was my first aha in the classroom. So yes.
Thank you. And so as the crowd can hear, we have a wide range of expertise on how to use technology for adult learners. A few things you all have said, I want to start to dig into a little bit. one of them was something that Fatma said early on, which was helping students get their aha moments, which I think ties to what Rachel was just saying about finding a way to use the technology they're already using. And I think this gets to Sarah's point, which is that we're helping them get digital skills, and they need those digital skills to do real things. And so a question I'm going to propose to the group is, what is a best practice for doing this? How do you figure out what will help a student get an aha moment, or what digital skills they need, and how to integrate those things with what you're already doing in the classroom? And I'm opening this up to see if any of the three of you want to jump in with an answer. If not, I'll just call on someone.
No need to do that. So I feel practice, hands-on practice in the classroom, using, just like what Rachel was saying, your cell phone, for example, and finding ways to ask students and help students, for example, to use Google Maps, right? Find directions, or using WhatsApp for our ESL students, or text messaging to talk to each other. So like just setting those basics for them to become comfortable with using that tool. If a lot of institutions have iPads now, or Chromebooks, or so having the opportunity to get that started in the classroom, a little bit supervised, right? Getting that support so that then they can take it on at home and use, if it is apps that we are recommending, or if it is other software or technology that then they can practice on, but structured, right? Don't wait for them to kind of think about what to do and what kind of exercises they can do, but structure it for them and get them started in the classroom. I feel that has worked really well for us.
Everyone agree with that? Anyone want to have anything they want to add to that?
I would agree. I was saying practice, and like low stakes practice, I think is really helpful. I know a lot of students now are preparing to take high school equivalency and other, applying for jobs online, but having a lot of practice without, those high stakes attached is really important. I was just thinking, when I used to do training courses for workforce development, and we worked on professional skills, financial literacy, right? Like those kind of skills related to working. Just having a Google Calendar invite, for students to come to attendance, even though if they know it's Wednesdays at 2 p.m. in this room, or whatever it is, but getting them in the habit of using technology to do planning, scheduling, follow-up, letting you know if you're not able to attend, writing an email, right? So some of those professional kind of wraparound skills, I think, are really important to build in as part of your class or training.
And did you ever find that your students were afraid of digital skills, that there were some in the classroom who embraced them and some in the classroom who were really reluctant adopters of technology? Everyone's nodding.
Yes. In fact, if it's okay, I'll chime in. And I think that I was going to add two things that I think are so important. And one is assessment. And I'm not talking about CASAs, that has its place, but I'm talking about a teacher's assessment of the landscape of digital skills in your classroom, which I think is so important. So knowing the skills in your class, I think, helps you to know who are the really comfortable users of technology and who is hesitant. And then you can pair them up, or you can put them in groupings. You can strategically address that anxiety. And the other thing, I think, there's assessment and then there's choice. And I think choice is another really important thing. I'm going to share a link in the chat to some resources that I pulled together around this strategy that I used to use, called a digital literacy action plan. And this was my way of helping learners set their own goals with technology and then follow through in learning new skills. And what I learned through that process is, I had a student who wanted to learn how to use, what is that one? Microsoft. It's that database tool that like none of us probably use, but he was using it for his, company, and he was an entrepreneur and owned his own company. Whereas I had a mother who wanted to learn Google Classroom, and I try to imagine if I had blanketed some kind of digital skills lesson for both of those two learners, I would have really missed the mark for both of them. And I think technology is, yeah, it was Microsoft Access. Thank you, audience. I think it's so, because it touches every part of our life, we usually do have really clear vision of what we want to be able to do with it. So we have to figure out ways that we can differentiate and address each learner's needs as well as their desires and interests.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that technology is often held up as a benefit for is differentiation. Like, technology can differentiate instruction much, much better than human teachers can, because it can do it at scale, it can leverage big data sets, it can understand what people need, and learners can work on different things at the same time. One question I often get when I talk about that, though, is, well, how do you manage a classroom when everyone is working on a different problem all at the same time? So any of you want to weigh in on that? What do you do when your learners are all working on different things? And related, there's a question in the chat about, what do you do when the only technology in the room belongs to the teacher? Everyone's nodding. I'll start and then see if anybody wants to jump in. So if the only computer in the room belongs to the teacher, that often happens, but students will often have personal technology. And having them use their phones for activities in class that are structured is great. They can do a lot of things on their phones. Often the phone is the only computer they have access to. So even though you're teaching them to do things with the computer, they might need to use the phone for email, for doing research, for downloading and editing documents. You have to ask them first if they're willing to use their personal technology. But if they are, they can sit in small groups and work with phones. There was another question in the chat about what teachers do when you're not personally familiar with all of the technology, which happens all the time. Like, I have an iPhone. I don't know how to use an Android at all, but often other students will have Androids, or they'll have iPhones, or they'll have tablets. And so letting them set personal goals and work together on small groups on a common task, but in their own way, is one way to address that. I'm not sure if that resonates with the panel, or if anyone wants to add anything.
Yeah, I'd like to put a plug in here for libraries. Now, with all the acts out there, there's a lot of loanable technology that you can send your students to borrow, for example, or ask them to bring in more their own technology to the classroom. Because a lot of times you have people with iPads that were given out to them that they don't know how to use, or maybe, and then the teacher, sometimes you run into, where I don't want to be, that tech person who's going to help them figure that out. And you have great suggestions, Katie, but also, those are their tasks. Those are things that they can do on their own. And then you're giving them, some reasons to invest time in it. And it's really hard when there isn't technology in the classroom to engage, but any tools that are available should be utilized in one way or another. And another plug again for the libraries. We do have technology to lend out. I mean, I'm in New York City, but I'm sure there are many libraries with a lot of grants. And sometimes we actually have that technology sitting in, cubbies that nobody's taking it out.
That is a great plug for libraries. And libraries are often a place where learners are comfortable. They are welcoming. They are where adults go to get help. And so reminding your learners and your students that there are resources like the public library that will have things for them.
I was going to add a little bit to that about just assessing learners, like where they are. So Barbara Bush Foundation, in collaboration with Digital Promise, released a digital literacy resource guide for anyone who's working with adult learners, right? It could be a volunteer, it could be a librarian, it could be a certified, seasoned adult educator, right? Really runs the gamut. But we start with the idea that you're not teaching digital skills, you're teaching people how to develop the skills they need to meet their own goals. And so some of the strategies seem unrelated to digital skills that are in the resource guide, such as doing an empathy interview, right? Sitting down with the learner, getting a sense of where they're at, what their goals are, what they're trying to accomplish when it comes to technology, how do they already use it? And, Rachel mentioned assessment too, right? It can be conversational in nature, to just really understand where they're trying to go. And then, developing some of the strategies or applying some of the strategies that we know work with learners. Such as, if the person has like some reading difficulties, potentially dyslexia, whether or not you can identify it or not, you might try to apply like a text to speech tool. So helping the student learn how to play aloud, a reading that you have, right? So giving students kind of strategies that they can use, even Google Translate or different things that they can go back to in their own time, I think is part of that teacher as facilitator or mentor as facilitator role. I always go back to this idea of facilitation, not teaching when it comes to technology, because the learner really has to apply and use it and get into problems. I don't know how many people on the chat, you could probably say, how many students are afraid to I went to a different page, right? Like I don't know how to get back to that page. But those moments of fear can be like, oh, let me teach you how to use the back button, not all is not lost, right? Or how to save a draft as you go. So a lot of the things you can't anticipate until you're in it.
Exactly. And I love the idea of talking about adult learning as facilitating, because as adult educators, we all know that adults learn by doing, and they learn best when what they're learning is relevant and interesting to them and solving a real problem that they have. And so the best way to approach it is facilitating them as they're working on whatever it is they need to work on. There have been a bunch of great comments in the chat. There was a question here, which is that the smartphone is the main source of technology for my students. Very few have computers or printers. Do your students, anyone, have keyboards to use with the phones? And I'm curious how the panel would respond to this, to see if this is something that you've had your students do, work with external keyboards on smartphones.
I have not. And I think that I would share a couple of strategies here. First, I would say there's a lot of value to them feeling super comfortable with what they have. And so I would say the first step would be using the keyboard that's in their phone. And I know that that's really uncomfortable and not ideal for some tasks, like building a resume. That would be extremely tedious. But I think there are things that we can do as instructors to set that up, right? Like one paragraph sent via WhatsApp to help them feel a little more comfortable typing on their phones. I think another idea is to, like Fatma was saying, look into where you can borrow or carve out some time for them to get regularly on a keyboard and practice. And a third idea I want to present is what I love that Dr. Glenda Rose has done. I'll give her credit, but she has thought through some ways to engage learners with technology without the technology. And I think that's another solution we should think about more, is like, what is a paper-based thing that I can print out so that students feel more comfortable when they see the real thing? And a keyboard is a great one, right? Like getting them comfortable with those characters in English, with the layout of the keyboard, that can be done on paper. And then when they go into a computer lab and they see this expensive equipment and sit down in front of it, it's a little less anxiety inducing, I think. So I like that approach too.
Yeah, one thing we heard when we had this conversation at COABE was also making sure that your students are not afraid of the technology. Like they need to know that they can't break it. Nothing they do will make their phone explode, that they won't type the wrong thing and never be able to get back into their document again. And someone, and I wish I could remember who it was, suggested like printing out a in case of emergency sheet for adult learners. Like, this is how you undo. This is how you go back.
It's like
This
a
is
panic
how you,
something.
the
Panic button or
the
something.
panic button,
Yeah.
so that they can see. And I think it's really helpful to show them, like, share your computer screen and type a very long essay, and then select the whole thing and then delete it, and then show them, look, you can get it all back. It's still there, and showing them versions in Google Docs. Because fear keeps people from trying new things, and giving them tools to use so that they aren't so afraid is really, really helpful.
One thing I'd like to add to that,
Yes.
I feel sometimes we get stuck into providing the technology and we don't do until we have an actual computer, or we're going to invest maybe in those keyboards for phones, etc. And that's not necessarily what should stop us from, engaging students. So sending them out to CVOs or to their kids' school computers, or whatever technology the schools send with them, should help them engage with the technology. And I personally do not recommend the keyboards on the iPads and on the phones, because they're not necessarily natural, and students should be comfortable using the touch screens and typing because they can use the keyboard on that touch screen. If you turn it around, it's going to be big enough, and you can still practice it on the touch screen. So you don't need extra technology for that. And I don't know if you're going back, Katie, to the question about how to teach different levels, because I had a couple of.
Yes, well, that's actually a really good segue, because we've had a few questions in here about how you manage a classroom with learners working on different levels and different activities, not necessarily what technology do you use, but like, what do you do as a teacher? So if you can weigh in on that, and if anybody else, I'm sure Sarah and Rachel have things to add here too.
Absolutely. Yes. That's the fear sometimes when you have students engaging in activities in parallel, and they're at different levels. And if you work for a CBO or for any organization or program that does not have enough funding or enough students to be at that specific level in the class together, this is something that everybody runs into. You have, you combine a 0 and 1 level class, a 2 and a 3. That's the same as having them work in different on an app to support their learning, for example. And that's where teachers should be comfortable with flexible grouping and making sure that, they have students who are in the same area, maybe working in groups and doing some peer tutoring, and giving them activities to practice their language and to practice what they've been learning in the classroom. Even if it is just with, those separate groups, so that the teacher has an opportunity to listen in and to read their work, and to be able to provide full class lessons that address the different needs. So that's really important, especially if we always talk about differentiated instruction, and you can have the same activity or the same content, but everybody is feeding in a different part of it, so that everyone is covering or discussing the same topic, but maybe the grammar point that one group is going to fill in sheets for, or do that, individual or small group activity, and it's going to be different in different pods in the classroom. So that's just one of the things, and I'm sure Rachel and Sarah have.
I was going to build on that, the idea of having, helping students develop different skills in different areas. So I was in a workforce setting. I had an experience where we were working in a career and technical education program, but we did not have a significant number of English learners enrolled in the program, even though that program led to being hired, starting at high wages, so students could graduate with a high school equivalency and a job with the MTA, electrical installation. But we didn't have many English learners. And this kind of goes back to how educators sometimes get in the way of student learning. And what I mean is, there are practices and there are policies, right? And we had a practice in many cases where students would not be referred to take on, a content class like electrical installation because of English language skills, right? Or digital skills. But actually, we ended up flipping it and having the students start with the workforce or career and technical education class. Since many students came to the country with electrical installation skills, some of the students worked, on the weekends or at night, doing electrical installation. And so we enrolled students based on their interests, based on their workforce skills, and then integrated the English language support there. So I think we also have to be flexible about what needs to come first in order of operations for student learning. Sometimes we make too many decisions about students' learning pathways versus really having it be a learner-centered approach and understanding where are they trying to get to, and can we support some of the foundational reading, writing, digital skills through a workforce related coursework or something else that they're trying to achieve. So just thinking about how sometimes the structure of our programs can impact a learner progress as well.
I think that's a really good point. And I think it's worth saying that when you're talking about foundational skills, reading, listening, you have to do something else to learn all those skills. You never learn them in a vacuum. So the more you can have your learners working on whatever else it is they want to be able to do, you'll bring the other skills along with them. Rachel, were you going to add something to this thread here?
Oh, well, I just added Carol Ann Tomlinson, right? Her 4 ways of differentiating are a great way to think about this. So it's content, you can differentiate what you're teaching, process, you can differentiate how they go about learning, product, what the final assignment and turn in is, and then environment. That's the grouping and the classroom environment. So I like those, always give me fresh ideas. And I hate to come in this soon with ChatGPT talk, but I do want to say, if you start, what we've seen so far with teachers using ChatGPT is contextualization, differentiation. Those are 2 of the biggest ways that this can support your practice. So coming up with stuff that's in different contexts to address, different learners or whatever, just coming up with that language practice in the right context, it can be so useful for that. And this issue of differentiation, it can also be really useful for generating differentiated practice sets, but it can be really useful also just for giving you ideas of how to do that. And so I have used it for digital skills. I think it's a great thought partner chatbot to go to and say, I've got these different profiles in my class. What can I do to give them some different activities?
I love that. And there was a question about ChatGPT. We were going to get to it, and we can keep answering questions about it, but it's how to use it as a thought partner, as an instructor for how to organize your class, and then also how to have your learners use it. I think there's a lot of chat going on about different software programs, what people use for differentiated instruction. I think it's worth pointing out that everything that's been suggested so far has to do with learners being collaborative in a classroom, but in small groups, working on real tasks. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that one of the benefits that we have as instructors is that we should have our students collaborating together, even if they're collaborating in small groups. If they're just using a piece of software on their own, that can happen outside of your classroom. But if they're inside the classroom, getting them to use real technology like WhatsApp or Google Docs or Google Maps, or using Siri in a phone to practice pronunciation, seeing if the phone can transcribe their English as they're giving directions. These are all ways to integrate authentic tasks that people need to do for workforce training, for basic education, and the opportunity to be in a classroom with a teacher who's giving feedback. I think there are more questions here. One I wanted to ask the crowd is that my problem is that I have students who can do computers, phones in their language, but the English language computer phone is so different for them. Any resources for this kind of issue fear with second language students? And I would love to hear what our educators say about this. Rachel, you're nodding. Does that mean you want to jump in with an answer?
Oh, it reminds me again of Dr. Glenda Rose, who wrote a whole curriculum that starts out paper based, and she does this like practice activity with educators to train them on the curriculum. And it's exactly that of like, look at this keyboard in another language and try to figure out what the heck you're supposed to do with it. It's very difficult. And it really helps you see through a learner's eyes what it's like to see a keyboard in a different language and then be expected not only to use it, but also to produce, a language that's not your own. So it reminded me of that. And what can I say? There was a time that I actually asked my learners to change their smartphone language to English. And what I will say is don't do that. That's a bad practice that I did and thought it was a good idea at one time. And I think it's a terrible thing to do. So I will just say, respecting that these are their personal devices and you should always let them make whatever choices they want to make with their personal devices. But you could teach them how to toggle between different keyboards. If you do want them to practice in English, that would be a great skill for them to have.
Yeah. And there's no reason why they need to have their phones set to English if they're comfortable using their phones in whatever language they have their phones in. If they're producing the work they need to produce in English and using an interface that's more familiar and comfortable for them, that's great.
Yeah, and I really like that. So the idea of toggling in between languages, so knowing to go back and reset your phone so that it has more than just Korean or Chinese or Arabic, and then showing them how to toggle between languages. And I'll go back to giving them small, safe tasks, right? That's practice needs to be safe practice and in a safe environment where they're not going to lose face. So if they're able to even send a message to someone they know, or they can even text themselves sometimes, right? And like answer yourself. If you plug in your phone number, you get that same message, right? And so let's talk to oneself. Let's be your own therapist or language trainer, and just send in small sentences. So that gives you that practice that they can show you if you want it as homework. And then it can take them on from there to maybe chat into the group, etc.
Exactly. And I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat about learners using Google Translate, using ChatGPT. And these are all tools that we need to teach our students how to use. If you're teaching adult learners who are learning English as a second language, they're going to need to use a translator. Like they're going to need help as they're learning English. So teach them how to use it in a way that makes sense. Teach them how to check their work. Teach them how to check for whether or not the prepositions they've picked make sense. Let them use, someone said, teach them how to use ChatGPT as a personal tutor. These are all things that we can teach them in a safe space with our input and the input from their classmates, so they go armed with tools out into the world when they're learning all of these workforce skills. I think there's another question in the Q&A.
I was just going to add too,
Yes.
we know like the wraparound services and supports that students often need too. And that's also a great way, to integrate moments of learning, like if there's a court date, or if, how to navigate to that appointment, or if they have a question about, childcare, where to go for information about XYZ, right? There are so many questions that learners bring, especially to teachers or librarians or someone they trust. So each of those is also an opportunity to help the student figure out how to search for things, right? How to conduct a search, how to figure out directions to get to a place. I know we've talked about Google Maps, but just, kind of as many real world tasks and examples as we can do. And so back to that idea of, differentiation or multiple entry points. If you're in a class and your goal is for everybody to use Google Maps, start with where do you have to go, this weekend, and everybody can search for the place they need to go, right? Rather than having everybody in the class go to the same location. So it's moments like that where you bring in the real world experience of the adults, or figure out how to get to your child's school. And they might not know the address, they might know how to get there and which bus they go. But if you break it down, can you Google the name of your child's school? Can you get the address, right? And just start building those skills and making those connections can be really helpful and help solidify like their memory of how to do that.
And how do you make sure that your students know that they should bring their real world tasks and questions to your classroom?
It goes back to the basics, right? You're not really teaching students a specific thing. It has to start with relationship building. With adult learners, you need to get to know your learners first, need to understand what they're trying to accomplish. And I think asking questions and making space for them, you know, to share low stakes things at first, right? But just building that rapport with students is so important.
For sure. There's a question here, and I have never used this, but has anyone used auto tutor with their students?
No, but we are actually in the same research network with our friends who developed AutoTutor. But no, I've never used it.
There's a comment here that says frequently learners don't know what they don't know, and skills need to be introduced preemptively by the instructor. When they encounter a situation after the fact where a skill is necessary, they're able to make the connection by drawing on what they learned. Yeah, and I agree that that is true if you're thinking about classroom like skills like reading skills or reading strategies, but adults know what they don't know when they need to do real things. They know they can't read the back of the medicine bottle, or they need help understanding a recipe, or they need to understand how to log into the portal at their kids' school. So helping them think more holistically about what they need to do and how language or whatever you're teaching fits into it is a place where you can have them try to come with their challenges. Because you're right, they're not going to say they need practice with the hypothetical third person conditional, like, but they will know that they need help writing a polite email to their boss to request time off.
So one thing I'd like to add here, Katie, is that what happens when something else is added to our traditional, training, like TESOL training. I mean, if you go and you get trained as an ESL instructor, for example, and I don't think that much of that happens for adult basic education, for high school equivalency. We talk a lot about contextualizing. We talk a lot about content-based, right? We talk a lot about differentiation, etc. When the pandemic hit and we went online, people started teaching online and they reverted back to lecturing because that's just, they didn't know how to kind of transition, but then keep all of good practices. So when we talk about integrating technology, that's something to keep in mind, is that I still need it to be student-based. I still need it to be content-based. I still need it to be differentiated. I still need the students to be doing most of the work and for it to be communicative. And so all of those amazing things that we do as ESOL or TESOL teachers, we need to carry them over with us and apply them to all of that technology integrated and also facilitated or supported instruction that happens in the classroom.
I think that's a really good point. And it's true. A lot of people, when everyone shifted online, it really divided the group of adult educators into two camps. The people who had been teaching with technology and used online teaching as a way of extending what they were already doing. And then the ones who sort of did emergency online teaching, which to Fatma's point resulted in more lecture style instruction and less learner engagement. And we need to not do that. We need to use technology to do all of the good things that we all know work for learners to learn. One of the, so there are a lot of people chiming in the chat right now about what they're doing with their learners and how they're able. One thing I think that's worth pointing out is that if you use technology that's different from your students, ask them if they can share what they're doing with each other. Ask other people in your life if you can see how to use an iPhone, if you have an Android phone. You don't need to become an expert in everything, but just getting familiar with more kinds of technology is what we're asking our students to do. And there was a really helpful comment in here too about not viewing technology only through your eyes. So you have your own relationship with technology, and that's going to influence how easy you think it is to use and which apps are easy or hard or which ones, and that's not going to be the same for your students. So be as inclusive as possible with the technologies that they're using and have them bring their technology skills to the classroom too. One of the things I wanted to ask all of my panelists to do is to see if they had a recommendation that they would make to new practitioners getting started with technology. And so we're going to work on those right now while we see if there are any other questions that you all want to put into the Q&A. And we started with Fatma before. So Rachel, we're going to start with you. What recommendation would you make to new practitioners getting started with teaching with technology?
I'm going to use an acronym that we used in Camp GPT. The acronym is GEAR, G-E-A-R. Number one, goals before tools. Think about what your goal is. We want to implement technology strategically. And usually our goals have to do with the academic subjects we're teaching. They also have to do with the digital skills we're building. They have to do with how we want learners to engage. And so if we know what our goals are in those different areas, we can choose technology and leverage it in a way that really makes sense and helps us get closer to those goals. So number two is E, explore and have fun. I think adult educators are worn. We are tired. ChatGPT is coming for us now. When do we get a break? So I think have fun with technology, really explore it, build communities around it, go to casual panels like this where you can, just ask your questions, and don't pressure yourself to be an expert in every tool and in every aspect of using technology, because you really usually don't need to be. And there's a lot that people will push at you that you feel pressured to know from a technological perspective that is just not necessary or applicable to your practice. And you already probably know a lot of the great things that you need to know. And then A is avoid bugs. So this is about ethics and equity, and making sure that you know what the pitfalls are. I think knowing what the digital divide is, what digital inclusion is really important to avoid having instruction that is not inclusive, or to avoid encouraging learners to give up data that is private for them and not great for them to share on different platforms. So just being aware that there are many pitfalls that come with technology. Fourth is R, remember to buddy up. And that's, again, about building community, having somebody that you can bounce ideas off of and that you can work with, and not working alone in trying to adopt new technologies. So that's what I think is important.
That's great. Thank you.
I love it. It's hard to add to that.
What was number 3? Avoid buzz or bugs?
Bugs. So like bugs, yeah. Because it was a camp theme, so they were bugs in the literal sense, but then bugs in the technological sense.
They're out of order, but they're all in the chat.
Love it. Thank you. One thing I'd like to add, or maybe a couple of things I'd like to add to that, even though it's quite inclusive of most of what needs to happen. I want to go back to emphasize the starting small, right? So the same way we talk about our students, and we want them to practice in a safe environment and do small tasks. Teachers need to familiarize themselves with the tool, but they need to start with smaller tasks and get the right professional development. So if there are administrators that are able to provide those trainings for teachers and make sure to help create those small communities that can support each other and create the buddy system, that's really important. But take it step by step, and don't get intimidated by the students that know more than you. Even when you teach a language, there's always that student who goes and challenges your grammar knowledge, and we don't stop teaching English altogether. We just say, sure, I'm going to go check on that dangling modifier that I'm supposed to know about. But you say, sure, come and help me out, or let's do it together. Because as long as we're acknowledging that we're also learners and everything is evolving and there's always going to be a change. And with the generative AI, this is just the start of a lot of things changing. We always still know that we need the teacher. right? The teacher is indispensable. We're not going to get rid of our teachers. We love them. We need them. And
we need more of them. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. We do not have enough. But then we also want them to stay on top of new things that come out so that they're supporting the students the right way. And then they're able to support more, because we all know that we're serving only about 4% of the people we need to. So if we're able to delegate some of the work to this smart technology, let's do that and support more people.
Thank you, Fatma. Oh, I was just going to add to that. It got me excited. So the idea of starting small, I think, is so important. I was thinking back to when I first started. I taught teachers for many years at Hunter College. And at first I wanted to give them everything, put everything online. And I had all these different activities. And, you know, there were different activities for different days, and people just got confused, right? Even the most tech savvy people were like, wait a minute, I thought we usually do X, Y, Z. And so one of the things I learned is, you know, consistency for like practice and protocols or processes really is every day you kind of start with the same thing. So maybe you log in, you know, you see the word for the day, you see, you read something, right? Just doing the same thing over and over, using the technology really helps to build skill and confidence in using that technology. So sometimes less is more. I know everybody on this call, we're all very like love content, love information, love teaching, but it could be too much, right? So just starting small with learners and helping build some processes, and that also builds the skills that students need. So I think less can be more when it comes to using technology.
I love it. From goals before tools to start small to less is more. We have a lot of catchphrases for you to take with you as you go forth to use technology with your students. We're running out of time, and I want to make sure we address any more questions that any of our 173 watchers have. We're so excited you were all able to join us. I think that we've covered a lot of ground. Someone asked about the resources, and we will go through the chat and we will pull out all of the links and send them to everyone as a follow-up. Yeah, there's some people who are echoing that having routines is good. Don't overwhelm your learners. I think one of the most important things someone said here too is don't be afraid. Like, your learners are afraid too. They're learning something new. You're never going to know every single thing. You will always have students who know more than you do about something. And so you should embrace that. If they know more, then have them teach it. If especially when you're working with English learners in the US who often are highly trained in specific fields from their home countries, leverage the expertise that they are bringing to the classroom. Someone wants to know if there is something more useful than the digital North Star assessments for the basic assessments. Has anybody, we've gotten some recommendations for North Star. Anybody have any recommendations for digital literacy tools?
This is such a gap, actually, digital literacy assessment tools. And so I think one thing to do is be patient. I know North Star is trying to update things. I'm trying to think too. I think if you go to the digital skills library, there are some assessments there. One I'm thinking of in particular is a Wisconsin MOOC, and it is like these e-modules that are very basic that learners can work through. I remember I used to use it when I needed a learner just to work independently on very basic digital skills. It was a great tool for that. So that's, if you go to digital skills, thanks, Jose, just shared the link in the chat. You could maybe find that.
Yeah, another thing you can do is actually just have them work on the digital skills, like have them get an email address, get another email address, send an email from a new email address to another email address, have them go in and start a conversation in WhatsApp, create a document and download it and send it to another student, like almost have a portfolio of digital skills, of digital artifacts that they create and use, because there's so many things available for free. Rachel, you were going to say something.
I will drop in the chat. We have a digital skills checklist that I think is also super helpful. So as a teacher, if you're like, oh, what should I like run them through and see if they can do it? The checklist will help. So I'll find that and put that in the chat too.
I also am sharing a world education tool because world education is one of our key partners of All In, and the digital skills glossary I just dropped in the chat is unbelievable. You could use it for vocabulary practice, vocabulary quizzes. I'm still a fan of explicit vocabulary instruction. I think people always need that. And so just if you need, to go, this glossary is so helpful. We take for granted words like click, comment, words like badge, right? There's so much jargon in the tech space. So this glossary I find super helpful and I refer to it all the time. You could use it as a teaching tool as well.
Yeah, and have your students build their own glossary. Like have them come with the words that they don't know and then work as, and this is another great, somebody was asking about group activities for different levels. Have them work in groups to define different tech vocabulary words that they're not sure about. Once you start having them realize that not everybody knows everything, they get a lot more comfortable about asking questions and sharing. Okay, well, I think we're almost out of time. And rather than get cut off, we'll just say thank you to everyone for coming. We appreciate all of your questions and all of the comments. This was really exciting to do. And thank you to the 3 wonderful panelists for sharing all of their expertise. And everybody have a great rest of your Monday.
Yeah, thanks everyone. This was so fun. I love it.
Thank you. Looking forward. We'll keep it going. We'll have to keep this conversation going over time.
We can do a part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, ladies. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. There is a poll that we just launched. If you could fill that out before you leave. And everyone have a great afternoon. And thanks again, ladies, for presenting. Thank you, NGen, for sponsoring this webinar and presenting. And everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.